From the cotton fields of Mound, Louisiana, to the soundtracks of a generation, today's conversation is rooted in music history. Mike's guest is David Osborn, son of the legendary Joe Osborn, the bass player whose unmistakable groove powered the Ricky Nelson Band, helped define the Wrecking Crew sound in Hollywood, and anchored Nashville's famed A-team of studio musicians. Joe Osborn's fingerprints are on hundreds of hits from the 60s, 70s, and beyond, including his role in discovering and shaping the sound of the Carpenters. Now, through David's stories, we get a personal, behind-the-scenes look at the man, the music, and the moments that made it all unforgettable. This is more than a conversation. It's a journey through one of the richest musical legacies in American history. Mike's conversation with David Osborn begins right now.
By way of introduction, we'll be talking with David Osborn, whose father was Joe Osborn. David, you're doing well today, I hope.
Just fine.
David, our listeners may not know the name Joe Osborn, but if they've ever listened to the radio or bought records back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and beyond, I suppose, then they have most certainly heard about his bass playing. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's many people alive today that haven't heard him on something.
And, your dad, Joe Osborn, he played hundreds and hundreds of hit songs over the years, and we will get into that as we talk about some history. But, with the Ricky Nelson's band out in California, Ricky Nelson with Ozzie and Harriet, and as a session player with the famous Wrecking Crew, that's amazing. And then with the A-team sessions there in Nashville, and I suppose hundreds and hundreds of other sessions besides the Wrecking Crew and Ricky Nelson and the A-team. What I'm understanding, he just did those sessions when people would call him, he would come on in.
Yeah, he's just an independent contractor, I guess you could say.
Right.
And someone would call and say, can you be at such and such studio at 10 o'clock on Wednesday? And he'd say yay or nay, and that's the way it was.
That was his job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was. I mean, those guys were busy back in, I'd say, from about 66 up until 74 was the meat of it. And it wasn't unusual for Dad to be doing 3 or 4 sessions a day.
Well, I've got some of the groups here. I just want the people, our listeners, to just understand some of the groups that he recorded with. It's amazing. I've just got this brief list: the Mamas and the Papas, the Fifth Dimension, Johnny Rivers, the Association, America, Simon and Garfunkel, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Helen Reddy, Kenny Rogers, Tommy Rowe, Neil Diamond, and then, David, my favorite, and we will get into this story, the Carpenters, who I just adore and love, and your dad, he's the one that got them really going. And then with the A-team in Nashville, he went to Nashville, and I guess you were maybe in 1974, is that right?
Yeah, it would have been November of 74.
And there, the A-team, which is the top session players in Nashville. I mean, Merle Haggard, Mickey Gilley, Hank Williams Jr., on and on. David, what a career your dad had as a bass player. And I understand he did not start out playing the bass, and we will get into that. So let's just start at the beginning and tell me about your dad's early life. I know he was born in Mound, Louisiana. I don't know if you can even get to Mound, Louisiana anymore.
It's really amazing considering where he was born and what his family was doing. I mean, he grew up poor. They did migrant farm work, if it was getting the watermelons in or picking whatever, pecans, whatever it was, that's what they did. I mean, when he was 10, 12 years old, he was, loading stuff onto a truck. I mean, I can't really describe how poor they were. I mean, they got along. They had, whatever they needed, but they moved around a lot, never really had a stable home for long until Dad, he just knew he had to get somewhere. So he went and stayed with his uncle in Shreveport and went to high school there. That was the thing that changed it. He met James Burton. They were going to school at the same time at Fair Park there. A few years later, James would approach Dad about coming to play the bass for Ricky Nelson. So that's what got him to L.A. Somewhere along in there, he made the transition from playing guitar. At the time he was with Bob Luman, and they were in Las Vegas at a place called the Showboat. I'm sure it's long gone, but they had two guitar players. They didn't have a bass player, so he got elected to be the bass guy. So he bought a bass, and the next night he was the bass player.
That's amazing. I think the other guitar player was Roy Buchanan, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So we mentioned James Burton. That's the name there. My goodness, James Burton from Shreveport. And they went together. They went to high school together at Fair Park, I believe you said. And, of course, James Burton, my gosh, with Elvis so many years, with John Denver. And man, that guy's a legend, no doubt, along with your dad.
Oh, yeah.
So they did go to high school together and knew each other in high school.
Oh, yeah.
I understand your dad may have played when he was very young. You know, the Bossier Strip there was a pretty popular place back in the day, David. And I understand maybe that your dad went in there maybe when he was 14, 15 years old.
I couldn't tell you exactly how old he was, but I know he wasn't old enough.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's the way it rolled back then. And I'm sure he was just trying to, get acquainted and trying to learn his craft a little bit.
Yeah, he was in high school and had been hanging with James, and he got hooked up with Jerry Hawkins. Now, you've probably heard of Dale Hawkins.
Oh, yes.
Well, Jerry and Dale are brothers. Now, Dad played guitar with Jerry and then met Dale and did some of Dale's early recordings when he was still a guitar player.
Yeah, Dale Hawkins, I believe, with James Burton with Susie Q. Am I right?
Right. Now, Dad didn't play on Susie Q, but he played on something called La Do Da Da.
Okay. I think I've heard about that before. I don't know who gave that name, but that's quite a name.
It's a funny record, too, but Dad played electric guitar on it. I mean, you listen to it now, it's kind of funny, but, I mean, back in the day, that was a big record for Dale.
Yeah, so we got him in Shreveport when he was very young, met James Burton and played around there. And I guess from there he got with Bob Luman, and they started traveling. Is that correct?
Yeah, they went to Las Vegas to open up a casino, the Showboat, and they were there for a while. I mean, it was an every night gig for, I don't even know how long. It was long enough to where he moved Mom and, I was like 2 maybe. They stayed long enough to where they moved.
From there, he got a call from James Burton?
Well, yeah, James actually was in Bossier City, bumped into Dad and asked him if he would come and audition for the bass position, but he had only been a bass player for maybe a year or two, maybe not that long. He went and got the gig and stayed with Ricky, I guess, until the Ozzie and Harriet show was coming to an end. I guess this was around 1963, and he had been there since 60 or end of 59, around in there. I don't know exactly.
Would he be on some of the television shows there? I know James Burton. I recognize him on some of the shows of Ozzie and Harriet.
Yeah. At the end, when they play, they do a song or whatever. That's James on the right and Dad's on the left.
Well, I think one of the most recognizable songs by Ricky Nelson was Traveling Man. And right. I understand that your dad had a big, big part of that. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I've heard that story told a couple of different ways, but Dad tells it a little bit different than Jerry Fuller, who wrote the song. But Dad had been assigned to return a bunch of demo tapes. Back then, everything was on reel-to-reel. There wasn't a cassette for a number of years yet to come. But so all he had to do was mail them back to whoever submitted it. And he started listening to some of them and thought, Ricky, maybe you should take another listen at this one. And it ended up being a number one record for Ricky. And I think it was the only number one he had back in the day, in the 60s.
I understand. I listened to Jerry Fuller. I did listen to his story. He said he got a call from your dad and sort of got Jerry Fuller involved in writing some more songs for Ricky Nelson.
Yeah, actually, Jerry and Dad were pretty good friends after that.
Now, we did fail to mention that your dad has passed on. I don't know what year that was. What year was that, David?
It was in December of 2018, 81.
81, okay. Well, we got him there in California, and I guess being on the Ozzie and Harriet show with Ricky Nelson, I guess that sort of propelled his career, would you say?
Well, yeah, it put him on national television all of a sudden, and people in the business there in Hollywood were noticing him. So when the Ozzie and Harriet thing ended, and I guess Ricky was ready for some time off, Dad started getting a few session calls. I think Lou Adler was one of the first guys that started using him, and he was also doing demos at 4 Star with their little team, which Glenn Campbell was a part of that, and that's how they met, doing demos at Four Star. You may know this, but a demo is just where somebody writes something and then you want to record it so you have something that you can play for somebody else. You know what I mean?
Sure. Was Four Star a place where you did demos?
Yeah, it was a recording studio.
Right. And you mentioned Lou Adler. Lou Adler is really a very famous producer, Mamas and Papas, on and on. I think he worked a lot with A&M Records. Am I right?
I don't know about any particular record company. He had his own thing with Dunhill, and then Soul City, he was part of that too, Johnny Rivers and Lou.
Did you mention Bones Howe?
No, not yet, but he was right there. He was engineering for Lou back in the day.
Right. So he did a lot of work with Bones Howe engineering and Lou Adler, the producer then.
Yeah, and then later, of course, Bones started producing on his own. I think, the Fifth Dimension is the one that comes to mind as far as a Bones Howe production. If you listen to those records, that's why they sound like that.
Well, let's talk about the Wrecking Crew. How did that come about, if you recall how he got in with that unbelievable group of musicians who recorded hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hits for people? How did he come about working with the Wrecking Crew?
Well, that just kind of was the way it evolved. I mean, the name, the Wrecking Crew, didn't really kind of flourish until later, 10 years down the road. But those same guys, Hal Blaine, Dad, Larry Knechtel, there was Don Randy, there was maybe 20 guys that were getting the lion's share of the recording work there in Hollywood. But it was just because the producers that were working knew who to call.
Did they have a particular studio they went to every time?
No.
So they would go to whatever studio the people called in for that particular group of musicians. They may wind up at different studio every time they did a session then, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, he might work at 3 or 4 different studios in a day.
My goodness. Okay, see, I did not know that. That would be interesting people to understand it. Yeah, they would go to different studios and have several, like you said, several sessions lasting probably 18 hours or more. Yeah,
a session is 3 hours, and it starts at 10 a.m., 10 a.m. to 1, and then you have another one 2 to 5, and on 6 o'clock from 6 to 9 p.m. And then if you were really busy, you'd have a 10 p.m. till 1 a.m. And then you have to be back in your chair at 10 a.m. the next day, ready to go.
Did you ever go with him to any of his sessions, David?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, many times.
You recall any of the musicians there that you became familiar with?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'd see kind of the same guys all the time. Hal Blaine, 90% of the time. Jim Gordon came back from England in maybe 1970, so I got to see him quite a bit. John Guerin, another drummer that was working quite a lot. Earl Palmer. And then the guitarist, there was maybe half a dozen guys, Mike Dacey, Tommy Tedesco, Fred Tackett, great acoustic player, Ben Bonet, another acoustic guy. But you kind of see the same faces.
Any sessions stand out, a group or musicians, bands that came in, stand out to you during that time?
Not really. I mean, some of these that I went to, I was, say, America, for instance, I went to some of the sessions for the Homecoming album, but I already knew who they were from Horse with No Name had been out, and those guys lived in England. They are Americans, but they traveled from England, from their home, to come to Hollywood in order to work with Dad and Hal Blaine. So they booked those guys for a week, like 3 sessions a day. So in that case, you'd stay at the same studio all day, and they just for the purpose of recording that album.
I've listened to like the song Tin Man by America, and your dad's bass introducing that song is really just an amazing, and so many bassists have tried to emulate some of his licks there. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that's one of these songs that stand out to me, Tin Man by America.
Yeah, they had some good records. Let's see, Johnny Rivers, I knew. I'd been to his house with Dad several times and been to quite a few sessions into the 70s, 1971 or 2, when he did Rockin' Pneumonia, the L.A. reggae thing. Went to some of those, and that was the same bunch every time. He just used the same exact personnel.
Yeah, Johnny Rivers, another Louisiana guy, Baton Rouge.
Oh, yeah.
Let's move on to, I think your father had a little home studio there in your all's home there in L.A. Can you tell me a little bit about the home studio and what that was like?
Sure. It was a garage that had been converted, and just kind of nailed that garage door shut and built a wall between the clothes dryer and the washing machine, and you could still get out. But then it was just isolated off with a big 2x6 construction, kind of thick, hopefully soundproof wall. And it was just a 4-track Scully, but that's what everybody was using then. That's all there was.
Would he do demos there mostly, David?
Yeah. He and Dorsey Burnett had been writing together for a few years, and it wasn't unusual for me, being a kid, wake up in the middle of the night and go for a drink of water, and those guys would be sitting at the kitchen table just to sing, and had a paper and an acoustic guitar. And I think that they got the idea of maybe making this little studio in the garage, and that's how it started. Dorsey was there helping build and nail.
I guess my best story with that would be Karen and Richard Carpenter coming in when they were very young, coming into your dad's studio, home studio. They had not been known at all. They were very young. How much do you remember about the Carpenters? And your dad actually is the one that discovered Karen and Richard Carpenter.
I remember them coming to the house quite often in the summer months. I mean, Karen was still in high school, so during the summer months, they were there a lot. I mean, come stay all day on the weekend. They had won a Battle of the Bands thing, or the jazz trio, that they were really hot on recording. And I don't know how they got Dad's number, but they called him, looking for a cheap place to record. And he said, come on. So during the course of these first few days with them, Karen sang a song. And Dad said, I don't know much about jazz, but she can sing. And he recommended that they kind of put a pin in the jazz trio for the moment and develop her as a vocalist. So that's how that started. And then they started with stacking the vocals and developing that sound that ultimately became the Carpenters' sound. But nobody had heard it before up until then.
So I understand they may have been there for maybe a year, maybe more than a year, doing demos. And
it was a while. It was 66, 7, 8, up into 69, I guess. Well, it all kind of happened at the same time. I mean, as soon as Close to You came out, I didn't really see them. I mean, they were too busy. They were going on the road, and they were all of a sudden, they were the Carpenters. Really took off.
Oh, yeah. I understand your dad went to Hal Blaine, the famous drummer for the Wrecking Crew, and he asked Hal Blaine, maybe we could produce these youngsters. I think Hal Blaine said, well, I don't know if we have time, Joe, because we're so busy. Is that a true story, or that's something I've heard?
Yeah, it is. Hal says, I'm the guy that passed on the Carpenters.
Well, that's not that's something he's probably not high on his list, but my goodness, Hal Blaine did a lot of other great things as well. So how did A&M, Herb Albert, how did he come about getting the demo tape? Do you know anything about A&M, who the Carpenters eventually signed with A&M Records?
Sure, right. Richard had made some recordings on his own, and then they had the garage recordings. Richard had asked Dad if he would produce their records, and Dad said, well, I can't, because if you get signed to a label, they're going to give you a producer. You coming in, being a new artist, you're not going to have much pull, and it's highly unlikely they're going to let you pick your own producer since they're paying for everything. So I guess Richard and Dad had a little falling out there for a couple minutes, but he took some of those recordings and ended up at A&M. They signed him to a 2-album deal, assigned him a producer, Jack Doherty. The first album was okay. It didn't really have anything that kind of launched him, but that second album had Close to You on it, and that did it. I mean, that was huge for them.
No doubt. I understand that your dad actually played on just about every recording of the Carpenters. He was the bass player, and Richard Carpenter speaks so highly of your dad and how he was the foundation, really, the drums and the bass, the foundation of what they were trying to do.
Right. I don't know of Richard recording without him on anything except for that very first album. Dad's on some of it, but there's at least 2 other bass players on it as well.
You mentioned Jack Doherty, and I think I've understood the story there that he was a producer, but I think Richard did most of the producing, and I think Richard sort of got a little ticked about Jack Doherty maybe taking credit for a lot of what Richard Carpenter was a great arranger, and I understand a great producer.
Yeah, well, I think giving Jack Doherty that project was a great pick because Jack didn't really kind of produce them up one side and down the other. You know what I mean? Jack kind of let Richard have that free reign to do whatever he wanted to, whereas a lot of guys wouldn't have.
Yeah, very good point.
But as far as taking credit, I mean, the label's going to put produced by Jack Doherty, and that's just how that is. But as far as the arrangements and the parts, I mean, Richard wrote every note for everybody. I mean, anything, harp, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Dad would play his part, just like he wrote it. It's kind of funny, though, because while Richard was very meticulous, he was also constantly revising stuff. I mean, you might have half a dozen revisions on a given piece of music just in the course of playing it down for a little while. Oh, I don't like that. You know, we're going to change that to this. Joe, what do you think about this? Can you invent me something to go right here? You know, there was a lot of changes, but it was all written. You know, they change it on the chart.
Would it be safe to say that Karen and Richard both were almost perfectionists in their music?
Richard, definitely. That's a big part of why those records sound as good as they do. And Karen, she was, I don't know that was foremost on her mind. I mean, she wanted it to be good, of course. I think that came very easy to her. She'd sing standing there with her hands in her pockets and just sing. She wasn't pushing it or trying to, I don't know, kind of put energy into it. It was just, it sounded like that anyway, because it did.
Well, I would say, and I think most people would agree, Karen Carpenter probably has one of the most iconic and beautiful voices of all time, no doubt. And I think it'd also be safe to say, now I may be prejudiced on this, David, but without Joe Osborn, I don't know that there would have ever been a Carpenters. Now, I know they were talented, I know they were great, but even that, you have to have the breaks and you have to be at the right place at the right time. What would you say about that statement?
I think that's accurate. I think if they hadn't met, that wouldn't have happened. It certainly wouldn't have happened the way it did if it happened at all. I mean, they were all about the jazz trio. They didn't even know Karen was Karen.
Well, when your dad heard that voice, no doubt he said, hey, this is something that I've never heard before, and this has got to be out there. And I think he knew at that point that they would be stars.
Oh, probably. I mean, he definitely had an ear, and I think when he first heard her voice, I think he was amazed as anybody else was hearing her sing. I mean, nobody sings like her.
Well, people know who listen to my show, the Mike Stone Show, that how much I love the Carpenters. And when I found out your dad, Joe Osborn from Mound, really discovered him, that was just a surreal moment for me to get that and understand that. I just couldn't believe it. Well, we'll move on from that because I could stay on that story, but I know time is getting limited, and I know we have things that you want to do, but we'll try to move on quickly here. Can you talk about his equipment, his bass? I know he started out at guitar, and like you said, Las Vegas, he changed over and went to the bass. And
right.
What was the first bass or some of the amps and things that he used there in his equipment, if you can talk about that a minute?
Very simple. He didn't use pedals or any kind of effects or anything. He, in Vegas, when he switched to the bass, he bought one. All there was, Fender only made the Precision at the time, so that's what he got. You can hear that bass on Traveling Man, actually. And when Ricky was about to go do an international tour, I think Hello Mary Lou was out, and Leo Fender from the Fender Guitar Company, he gave Dad a jazz bass and an amp, and he gave James an amp and a guitar, because they were fixing to be all over the place. So he wanted them, playing Fender stuff. So he said, if I give you these things, will you play them? And sure. That was one of the first jazz basses that ever left the factory. And they weren't in the stores for another, at least a year and a half. I mean, they say the Jazz came out in 1962, but Dad was on the road with his in 1960.
Was that his favorite bass?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was his only one. He played that on everything except a couple of things. He used the Precision on Traveling Man, but later on down the line, he used an 8-string Hagstrom bass on MacArthur Park.
8-string? I've never heard of 8-string bass.
Yeah. It's just like a 12-string guitar. You got 2 strings on each note. You know what I mean? Instead of one.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Gives it a little twangy thing. Apart from those 2 examples, he played that same jazz bass on everything he ever did.
I understand he did not like to change strings on his bass.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah, that initial set of strings was on there had to be about 16 years. And one of them broke finally.
Yeah, he liked the tone and the sound that he was getting out of his strings, and I guess he just didn't want to change over.
No, see, a lot of those guys were very meticulous about not altering anything. Don't change anything because I've got more work than I can do. We're kind of measuring it by how much am I turning down instead of how much am I getting. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they were very almost superstitious about keeping it like it is. Use the same amplifier. That it was a a 1960 concert amp that was gifted to him at the same time the jazz bass was, from Fender. And he used that same amp in the studio up until about 1967. Then he got another one just like it because it was just too much. I mean, he had to get a guy to move them, and they'd kind of leapfrog these things from studio to studio for him,
I would say another thing safe to say, the stand-up bass was what was played prior to the 60s, I believe, and so your dad, Joe Osborn, was an innovator of the electric bass, the new kind of bass playing.
Well, this is true. In 1960, I think, what was it, around 1954 or 5 that the Precision came out. So the electric bass hadn't been around that long. Certainly wasn't, being used by everybody. Like you say, the upright guys were still playing the upright, doing something at a time and had a tone that was different.
Well, it certainly set the standard for all the bass players that came after. He is revered by most all the people I heard who play the bass. They always refer back to your dad, Joe Osborn. Did he have a favorite group or band or musician that he enjoyed playing for, or do you know?
He never said he did. I think to him it was a job. It was work. So he treated everything like it was important. I mean, it was, but if you're going into a Lou Adler session for Johnny Rivers or Mamas and the Papas, you can kind of guess that this is going to go somewhere. This is going to could be a hit for him. Maybe not. It'll definitely be on an album. And then you get the ones where it's just an independent songwriter that has saved up money and came to Hollywood to work with these guys. And he said just because they're unknown and this is kind of their first time out, you don't treat that any different. You give that guy the same thing you'd give to Lou Adler or, whoever.
Yeah, I think I've heard him say in some of the things I've seen him that he gave it his all, no matter what the song, no matter what the session, no matter who the musician was, he gave it everything he had because that was his job.
Yeah, he would tell me, he goes, they're not paying you to like it.
Right. Well, I guess
if you don't like this song, keep it to yourself.
Well, did he have any favorite songs then that he, there's some songs when as soon as you start hearing the bass, you know who's playing. Like, I guess, with The Fifth Dimension, the Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In. Would that be one of his songs that he would say, or did he have a song he said, hey, that was I think I did a great job on that song.
What he liked, or the only one he said he really liked was For All We Know. It's a Carpenter's song.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting, and I'll have to play that back again. I know it's got all of the Carpenter song, his bass playing, phenomenal. That's all I can say about that. Really phenomenal. I know this is impossible. How many top hits that he played on while he was with the Wrecking Crew? I mean, I guess I could answer that. Hundreds, I would say, the top hits from the 60s on through the 70s and 80s.
That's a good question, and I don't know. There's a lot of them. I mean, to play on that many great records, you got to play on a lot of dogs. I
would say many, many hours in the session playing it, but no doubt that some of the songs that I've seen, his catalog and the Wrecking Crew, and of course we'll talk about, if you will, his move to Nashville and how that came about with the A-Team. They're playing with the A-Team. What age were you there when you moved to Nashville?
Oh, I just was out of high school for about 15 minutes. Get the word we're moving to the country, and I'd never really known anything but L.A. It's where I went to school, and that's all I knew was the city. So we moved to Tennessee, Dixon County, close enough to Nashville, but not in it. And it was a big change at first, and it wasn't difficult for me. It was probably more difficult for Dad, but I made friends right away and found out that I liked to fish and I rather liked the country.
I don't blame you. What prompted that move to Nashville? Do you know, David?
Just, I think, job burnout in the city, the smog, the traffic, the pace of it. I think he wanted to slow down a little, but not quit. Moving there, he could still do as many sessions as he wanted to, but kind of, slow the roll a little. 4 sessions a day. I mean, I've seen his book where, say, the Carpenters are going to go in the studio for 2 weeks. They'd book him every day from 10 a.m. to 1 in the morning. It's 4-session day every day for the next say 15 days maybe.
How many years did he stay in Nashville with the A-Team? Do you know?
Approximately 15. He kind of gave it up, I guess it was around 1990.
I remember reading my research a little bit that when he went back to L.A., or he heard or called Richard, and Richard said, well, I know you're out there and you're doing a great job, but they're not letting you do a lot with the bass. But, he told Richard, well, that's what the song calls for, Richard. That's what the song calls for.
Yeah, that's primary concern is what does this song want?
Yeah, I thought that was a real, great statement. I mean, hey, I'm doing what the song calls for, and that's what I'm about. And Richard said, it's probably correct.
Yeah, then the artist is happy because they've had a number one record, and the producer's happy because they've had a success, and everybody's happy. If you don't like it, comes back to that thing, they're not paying you to like it.
So you enjoyed your time in Nashville, 15 years there. I mean, of course, you were out of high school. Did you stay there in Nashville that whole time?
Yeah, I did, actually. I kind of grew up on rock and roll, as you might imagine, but you're going to work in Nashville, it's country music. That was an area that I hadn't explored myself, but so it was a good lesson, the history of it and kind of where it came from. And
so you got involved as a musician yourself there in Nashville?
Yeah, I worked playing the drums for various country music folks and was on the road a lot. I wasn't a session guy like Dad, because with guys like Larry London and Jerry Kerrigan and, there was a host of killer drummers there. I mean, somebody like me that's young, just starting out, I got a pretty full plate doing demo sessions for some publishers there. I worked with Tree for a while. Started calling me, and I'd come in and do demos for their stable of songwriters.
What was that, a label? Was that a label? You said Tree. What was the name?
Well, Tree Publishing at the time, it was the biggest country music publisher in the world.
Okay, located right there in Nashville.
Yeah.
So after 15 years in Nashville, your dad decided it was time to retire and move back to Shreveport. Is that correct?
Yeah, he just, I don't know, I think, and I've experienced this too, but the business of the music business can be a little bit backstabby. I think he was experiencing some of that, and, 30 years, he was just ready to, take it down a notch. I mean, he still did projects. He would still go to LA and work with Richard. He went to New York a couple times and recorded with Art Garfunkel, just hit and miss stuff just for friends.
Whatever he could be selective, whatever he wanted to do at that time.
Yeah, and he didn't have to work. I mean, the union provided a pension, and he got old enough for Social Security, and he didn't need to work. But
right. Well, I'm sure he enjoyed maybe a little more relaxing time and being back. What I guess he always considered Shreveport home.
Yeah, his mother was here and family.
Right. Did you go back to Shreveport with him?
Not at the same time, but I did eventually. I got some experience with that backstabby thing, and I thought, I'm ready for something else. I got to Shreveport about the time that the casino boats were going in, and there was a lot of live work. Every one of these casinos had music 24/7. You could work as much as you want to.
You had a house band there, or you had your own band?
No, it was just local musicians that were already working, people that were doing these things. I don't know, word got around that there was somebody else new in town we could listen to. But once you get out and start playing a little bit, then the music community in Shreveport was pretty small, and it's very tight-knit. Everybody knows everybody.
So your career was in music for your whole career then, and playing and.
Well, like I said, it was mostly live work. I was on the road a lot and did demos when I was at home. If it was wintertime, I'd be hunting, and if it was in the summer, I'd be fishing or in the studio or on the road.
Sounds like a life to me, David. That sounds pretty great.
And I got to do a couple interesting things while I was there. I got to play on the Grand Ole Opry a dozen times.
Oh, yeah, in Nashville, yeah. That would be at the, not the Ryman. You're too young for the Ryman, so you were at the real deal there.
Yeah, the new Opry House. I was actually working at the Opryland theme park, which is gone now. But I did a summer there with a little rock band and kind of in the shadow of the new Opry House. That was kind of interesting.
Right.
And then ended up playing in it later.
You play any other instrument besides the drums?
Oh, yeah. I got interested in the bass I was probably 13 maybe. I remember asking Dad, can you show me anything about this? Like anything on how to tune it, just whatever.
Yeah.
So he goes in the closet and he comes out with a Telecaster and he goes, this is where you start.
Oh, back to the guitar
I was
again.
disappointed. Yeah.
Well, I guess he said, this is how I did it, and this is how you can do it.
Yep. He said, this is the way you can understand chords, and that'll help you a lot when you get to the bass.
Well, David, we're about closing up here, but I understand your brother or you and your dad maybe opened up a studio there in Shreveport. Was that a joint effort?
Really, that was my brother's business. He bought an old house and kind of gutted it out and built a recording studio in there. It's a really nice facility, and he also lives there. And they do, local bands. They were getting quite a bit of movie work for a while. People would come in to repair lines of dialogue that got boogered up somehow. But, you had guys like Jack Black and Queen Latifah and different, movie things come in there to fix a spot or change a line or whatever.
That was back when they had a big tax break for Louisiana for the movies, and I suppose that was very convenient for them to come into the studio. What was the name of the studio?
It's called Sandbox.
Is it still operating now, David?
Oh, yeah.
Sandbox Studio in Shreveport. That has a legacy, ladies and gentlemen, from Joe Osborn right down to his children. Hey, there may have been a grandchild that played the bass. Is that your son, or is that Darren's son?
No, that's actually my sister's boy.
All right. I was going to ask you if there was any more siblings.
Yeah, I have a brother and two sisters.
Okay. So
my dad was married to my mother for almost 52 years and had 4 kids. My mother passed away at the age of 71. Yeah, but they were together about 52 years at that point.
David, I heard your dad give a lot of credit to your mom because he was at so many sessions when you were growing up. He gave a lot of credit to your mom about, taking care of you guys. And I know it wasn't perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect family, but 52 years in the music business with the same lady, that is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, you don't see that much. There's a couple other Wrecking Crew guys that did the same thing. Larry Knechtel was married to Vicky for about the same amount of time. And Mike Basie's still around. And his wife, Kathy, man, they have to have been together now like 60-ish years, I would say.
My, that is great. That is great. And it is a tough life. I would imagine at times your dad probably didn't feel like going in and playing the bass. But
no.
Yes, just like any human would say, their job. I mean, sometimes, some days you just don't feel it. Some days.
No, but you have to.
Yeah, that's their job.
As soon as you start turning work down, your phone quits ringing.
That's right. I heard Hal Blaine talk about it. He wouldn't dare turn work down because the phone may stop, and he did not want that to happen. That pipeline of money dries up.
And I can remember those guys talking together, Joe and Hal, Larry, and talking about how many sessions you have in your book for this month, and they put out a number and, they'd say, well, I got about that same amount. And they were wondering, like, how long is this going to keep going?
Yeah. And I think you and I have talked and we've said this will never happen again. This era where you had the Wrecking Crew and the musicians and the people coming in and playing like they did, that era is gone forever.
Well, sadly, it's true. And you can listen to the music from now and the music from then. And I think the music from the 60s, 70s just beats it all to pieces. What's being manufactured now isn't really musicians in a room playing together. It's kind of pieced together a piece at a time. It's the recording process is different, with computers and things. And you don't really even have to play the thing. If you get 8 measures of a drum beat on into the computer, you can clone those two lines on out and make adjustments. It doesn't actually have to be played as such. You know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. And the way they go in the studio now is completely, like you said, completely with the digitized and all the things they have, the software they have now. And I'll tell you, some of these singers, you don't even know if they can sing or not because of auto-tune and all the rest of the pitching mechanisms.
Yeah. Well, it's another one of those things that's not real exactly. Nobody ever sang that, or, half the stuff you hear, nobody ever played that. It was just kind of knitted together.
All we can hope for, David, is it may go back like vinyl coming back. Maybe someday the people will go into the session and they'll take 2 or 3 takes and do it all together. But that doesn't seem possible.
No, see, back then you didn't want to be that guy that kept making that same mistake at the same place.
Yeah, I heard on the interviews about them talking about the takes, and somebody would mess up. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, we got to do it again. Do it again. Well, we're about to close up, David. You've been very gracious to do this. I guess one last question would be the fondest memories, maybe, of your father and y'all's experiences in the music business and outside the music business and other interests y'all might have enjoyed together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, during the summer is when I'd see Dad most of the time. I mean, during the school year, I'd be gone to school by the time he got up, and then I'd be gone to bed by the time he came in. So saw very little of him. But on the weekends and in the summer months in particular, we'd find time to go out and go to the Mojave Desert, was nearby. And Dad was an avid firearms enthusiast. So we'd go out and shoot skeet sometimes, or go on a rabbit hunt or something. And Dad loved to cook. I mean, this guy, some of the dishes he would cook are just like, how did you do this? He could cook. He taught me to cook and taught me how to shoot, taught me how to ride, all your basics.
Well, I would say, David, coming from the humble beginnings in Mound, Louisiana, and having the career that he had, it's really an amazing journey that Joe Osborn had, an amazing journey with all of these artists, all of these hit songs. That's not the measure of the man, though. What I can understand, he was just a real gentleman and very humble and very unassuming, and I like that about your dad.
Well, that's true. He didn't toot his own horn, kind of guy. He wasn't like that at all.
Well, David, is there anything else that you would like to share with us? This has been fascinating to me, and I believe it will be fascinating to the listeners.
I made a Christmas album it's been 20 years now, but Dad's on it, and James is on it, and, a bunch of friends from Shreveport, but it still sounds good, even after 20 years. Just have to crank it up a little bit. I'll send you a few of them if you give me an address. Might even be something you'd want to play on the radio around Christmas.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're big into, the different holidays and Christmas time, and that would be great.
As we wrap up this conversation, it's clear that the legacy of Joe Osborn lives on not just in the music that defined generations, but in the stories and spirit carried forward by his son, David Osborn. From Mound, Louisiana, to the heart of the recording world, it's a journey filled with remarkable moments, unforgettable music, and a deep appreciation for the craft. David, thank you for sharing these memories, these insights, and a piece of a musical history that continues to inspire. And thank you for joining us for this conversation. You can listen to Mike's show, Music, Stories, and Conversations on his live streaming station every Monday and Wednesday from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. At other times, you can listen to his curated music, which is continuously on his station. You can find his streaming station by searching for The Mike Stone Show on the web, which will take you to his personal show page. You can also download the Mike Stone Show app. Just go to the Apple App Store and search for The Mike Stone Show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the show.